Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Mothers. Today's episode is a particularly special one because it features our very first guest interview. And not only that, it's with someone who, deep in her soul, embodies the spirit of the mothers. We started this podcast because the full stories of women, the stories of the mothers, just were not being told. Plenty of people are out there telling stories about parenting, working, dressing, exercising, making us laugh at the quote comedy that is parenting full time, or getting us to buy more versions of self care. But nobody is talking to us, let alone listening to us. We mothers do not exist solely in relation to the things that depend on us. We exist within ourselves. We have identities, ambitions, wisdom, frustrations, courageous stories of triumph, and devastating stories of grief. But we are here, raising ourselves and the next generation. And we have a shit ton to say. As we thought about who would best carry our show into its interview era, the very first person that came to mind was Sa-Yun Yang, aka Sai. I have personally admired Sai since we overlapped at Harvard. She, an ever so slightly older classmate, which certainly made her cool, but she always had this presence and knowing about her. She existed in her own orbit with her own gravity. It turns out what I was witnessing was a woman on a journey to claim and maintain her own sense of agency as she went from Harvard to law school, snatching that JD, getting married. One of Sai's best qualities is that she's Canadian. And when she and her American husband moved to New York City, she didn't yet have the papers to work. So she found herself 8 months pregnant and thinking, maybe instead of squeezing my whole self into the life of law, maybe I'll build a life outside of that system. A system that, let's be honest, people, is not really built for us, women, mothers. So before it was the trendy thing to do, she entered the e-commerce space and built an incredible children's brand called Coco's Nest. Each of my kids proudly owns one of her iconic blankets. Uncomplicated, cozy, quality, real. Very Sai. After a few years, her family relocated to the DC area, and she moved into the children's experience space. Thankfully, because how awful are most indoor play spaces? She started a company called Nook, now called The Wonder, and she brought that uncomplicated, cozy, quality, real vibe with her. By then, she was pregnant with her fourth and final kid. And then the pandemic happened, which obviously just changed the game for everything and everyone. But life is all about paying attention, learning, and evolving. And if we do that, usually something good is around the corner. And that's where we find Sai today. She is the founder of Sai Agency, a strategy and branding agency for professional services firms and thought leaders. What I love, and what is so true to the Sai I admired long ago wandering around Harvard Yard, it's founded on the belief that we all want and deserve agency over our life's work. I am so very excited and honored to share our conversation with Sai as she reflects on her life through the lens of motherhood. I'm just amazed that we're all here in the midst of a snowstorm.
Are all four kids home right now?
They are downstairs, as is my husband. Yeah.
Love that for you.
When we were texting about potentially rescheduling, I was like, this is such a mother's experience where we're like, we're trying to organize all the things, and then the higher power intervenes and is like, nope, sorry, you think you haven't worked out. Sorry. It's the 100th day of school, so your child needs to dress up like
Monday.
An elderly woman. Oh, on Monday.
Yes, that is
they
Monday
still
for
do
us.
that?
Yeah.
Wow.
They still do that, but I also only just realized this year that she stopped doing that like many years ago because I now have a kindergartner and his class is like really into it.
That's really cute.
Wow. All right. Well, why don't we get started?
Yay.
Sai, you're one of those not all heroes wear capes kind of person in my life. I've always deeply admired you and really grateful that you and I got to work together. Well, I got to be in your orbit slightly in college. And then I'm like a leech that's like, what are they doing now?
Hey.
And then V and I got to work with you too. So fun.
Yeah, so fun.
But yeah, so excited that you're here. One of the things I think is so impressive about you is that, at least as an observer, it feels like you kind of living life, professional and otherwise, as much as anyone can on your own terms. Like you've gone through many iterations, evolutions professionally, something that I also am in, and I love seeing role models that are doing that. But maybe you could talk us through kind of how do we get to the Sai of today, who's
Oh
running an
gosh.
agency,
Yeah.
running a family, raising 4
Yeah.
kids.
Well, thank you for the very kind and generous words. Like I'd say in a lot of ways, like, heroes wearing capes. I mean, I feel like I'm just constantly trying and failing and trying and failing. But I guess thus is life.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, where do I start from? So I think I do have to start back from like growing up and we immigrated to Canada and I grew up in an immigrant home. And that will come back in the future as like, something I didn't think would impact me so deeply. Because when you're trying to assimilate and like kind of be part of the current culture and grow up in this new environment, you think you're here, this is you. But after college, I did the law school thing, I went into law, and I learned very quickly that it's a very demanding industry job area to be in. And soon after I got married, we had, I mean, the very technical story is that because I'm Canadian and I married an American and we were in the US, there was actually a period after we got married where I could not work legally because I had to go through an adjustment of status. And so during that period, I couldn't work and I was pregnant, very luckily. Very quickly got pregnant. And so, like trying to look for a job in law in Manhattan while being like, in your third trimester isn't like the best look.
But would be a great
so
movie. We should do that.
Waddling down the sidewalk, like.
But also, I mean, like totally honestly, like that gave me the excuse, I guess, to really pause and think. I mean, not that I took it that way. I mean, in the moment, I was that type A person who was like, "Oh my God, what am I doing with my life?" But in retrospect, like having those months to just sit for the first time, like I really never had an opportunity to do that, right? So, sitting with it and realizing that there was no version of motherhood where I was going to feel okay leaving my baby at home with someone else. And that was a very personal realization, understanding that whether I wanted it or not, the model of motherhood that it was in my head was very much from my own mother who was full-time at home with me. And that was something that like I just couldn't shake because it was so foundational to who I was and how I understood the role of motherhood and how I was going to enjoy motherhood. Like it just occurred to me that the blueprint, right? Like the blueprint or kind of the signature or, I don't know what you'd call it, but like it was embedded in my understanding of the world. And it was going to be very inauthentic to me, at least, to try to do it another way. And I think that's different for different people, but so
Sorry, real quick. I was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
curious if your mom, in that example of your mother being this role model in motherhood, did she seem happy? Do you think was she
Ironically,
joyful as
no.
a mother? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'd say a little bit of both.
Immediately no.
I mean, she would have absolutely worked if she could have, if she had like the language and the whatever skills, and we had the means to have like childcare, or if that was even a thing, she would have worked. I think she would
Yeah.
have loved working, but she was also like a really doting, she packed all our lunches, food is her love language. Like anyone who has a Korean mother, food is everything. So, um, that was just like a huge part of it. So I'd say I've learned over the years like how your mother mothered very much informs how you can enjoy motherhood, right? And it certainly did for me. And so at that juncture, I basically said, I'm not going to go into like corporate law at this point, and I stayed home with my firstborn. And that was, in New York, and it was fun. And I like, honestly, we just had like a really easy baby, easy going. And I just had the best time.
Yeah.
I had the best time. I always said like she's just like an accessory. Like she went everywhere with me and she just gave me like the perfect excuse to just like go places and go for walks and do fun stuff. In her first year of life alone, she went on like 11 flights. Like we traveled everywhere with her. Like we were like, okay, she's a lap infant. We are going to get that free ticket for as long as we
Mhm.
can. We traveled to so many weddings that year internationally, went to France, Italy, went to Japan, went to Korea. We went, it was just like a wild time
It's
in
incredible.
retrospect. Yeah. But then at the same time, I'll say, I still had this desire to do something in addition to. And so I really wanted to start a business. I've always had like a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. In college, like I made handmade jewelry and like had a little store. So I had this idea for an heirloom knit baby blanket brand. And at the time, nothing like it existed. It was fairly limited. And so I started that. That was called Coco's Nest. And
Love Coco's Nest. Like, really do miss it. All of our kids have one of your blankets, actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I know. I
That's so
know.
sweet.
See, I'm just a
That's-
leech here, being like, maybe you'll
I
be
love
my
this
friend if I buy a blanket.
I bought 3.
I still have like a few that I'm like hoarding in the basement.
Oh.
I don't know for what reason. I'm like, are they going to last until my grandkids? Probably not.
Yeah, they will.
But I started that brand, learned a lot about ecom, and
Mm.
it was at the beginning stages of like the mommy influencers on Instagram, and it
Mm.
was just an interesting ecosystem at the time. And also like living in Brooklyn, like starting a business, like it was kind of the thing to do.
Yeah.
And then we moved down to DC for my husband's job, and it's a very different space. DC is like in many ways the opposite of the Brooklyn. But as we got settled here, I started, continuing the Coco's Nest ecom brand. We had a second baby, um, adjusting to life in DC suburbs, which is a whole different thing. I always tell people, like when people ask like what was the most challenging from going from 0 to 4 kids, and I always say it was 1 to 2.
Mm.
That's so
Because
funny.
one, like I said, it was like a purse, like she was just an accessory that came with
Yeah.
us. But 2 is a lifestyle change. Like once you have
Mhm.
2, it's like you have the car, you have the double
Mhm.
stroller, you have the bags, like your whole schedule changes in many ways. So that was a big adjustment. And while here, of course, like I, joined another business and worked on an experiential like kid brand, which I worked on for a number of years. And then the pandemic hit, and during the pandemic, I was pregnant with my 4th. I totally skipped over my 3rd, but like he came somewhere
He's
around
there.
there.
That happened. Anyways, next.
Yeah, in some ways I can paper over it because it was just a period of consistency and just like stability. But pandemic was very disruptive, so it like
Yeah.
takes up a big chunk of my headspace. We had 3 kids, and I was pregnant with our 4th during the pandemic, and that was the pandemic, which also pretty much shuttered the experiential retail brand.
Right.
So managing kind of that and new baby
Ugh.
and virtual schooling plus
Mhm.
preschool,
Oh, no
that was
way.
a challenge.
Yeah.
um but pivoted again, and now I run a strategy and design firm, and we work with thought leaders and professionals and organizations, consultants, consulting firms on kind of navigating the new space of media and thought leadership. And so that's what I've been doing since. And now our 4th is in preschool, and this fall is going to be like, I know a lot of people have like 40th bashes, but I feel like when our youngest starts kindergarten and
Oh,
we have
yeah.
all kids in school, like that'll be for me, that's like in terms of life and motherhood, that's a huge milestone for me. So I'm looking forward to that. So
Yes,
that's
that's
Thrive today.
huge. I love that. Good
Yay.
job. I also love the agency now is very aligned
Mhm.
with this kind of philosophy. It's the agency. Like it's all about
Yes.
having agency, which
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
something that you fought so hard for in your own
Hmm.
life and
Yeah.
carved out alongside
Yes. Yeah.
everything else. I've really always admired that. Um, so your kids now are preschool. What's the range?
So 11
Preschool
is my
into
eldest,
okay.
11, 9, 6, and 4. So like 5th grade, 3rd grade, kindergarten, and preschool.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I still am amazed. As someone with 3, I'm like, how the fuck do you do 4?
It's only
Literally.
it's only one more.
I know. And then everyone else
It's
takes care of
only
everybody. I
one.
don't know. Yes,
I
yes.
know.
So you mentioned this a little bit, but I'm always
Yeah.
curious, and I will say this as someone who's candidly, and this is the great irony of starting this podcast.
Yeah.
I've always been a little ambivalent about describing myself as a mother.
Mm.
But I'm
Mm,
curious where mother sits in your list
uh-huh.
of identifiers. Perhaps it's changed over time, but
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
how do you bring that forward? How do you describe yourself? Do you think of yourself as a mother first and then everything else, or some other version?
It depends on how you define motherhood, I guess.
Mm.
I guess I don't at least no longer consider it as an identifier because it's so embedded into my
Mm.
DNA. It's
Oh,
almost
wow.
like
Yeah.
saying I'm human. So there's no separating me from mother at this point. And I'll say that was a journey, right? Like it's not like it was day one, but I'm there now. I feel like I can't quite separate what I am and who I am as a mother and who I am outside of motherhood. And that's not to say it consumes me. Although it does consume me sometimes, but I'm definitely in a phase and I am very much aware of like the different stages and phases of motherhood, but I'm in a phase where like I'm so in it
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's hard now to separate like the before. So that
Yeah.
very much, informs our day to day and priorities and decision making. I mean, all those things can't be separated from my my motherness, like
Yeah.
um my identity in that way.
I
Yeah.
love you saying that it'd be like saying I'm human. And I think I
Hmm.
notice it more in this no longer new era of social media where everyone has a title, everyone has a
Yeah.
short
Hmm.
bio descriptor, whether
Hmm.
it's in their personal or professional lives. And I've noticed, and this is probably baggage that I'm bringing, but some people say
Mother.
their list is like mother,
Yeah. Wife.
executive, whatever,
This.
and then some people don't have that. So
Hmm.
I think people are thinking about in what way am I putting forward the fact that I am a mother. And what you said very much aligns with, I think I wouldn't have thought about it this way, but it seems implicit. I'm
Hmm.
alive, I have children, therefore I'm a mother.
I breathe. Also mother.
Yes, yes. We
Eat
don't need to
some.
state it.
Sometimes I drink water when I
Yeah.
can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. How do you think you mentioned a little bit too, but how has being a mother influenced how you approach the work that you do, whether
Mm.
it's deciding what work you do or how you show up and what you prioritize within that workspace?
Mhm. I think you mentioned before, like I think the through line for much of my story has been looking for agency in both life and work. And I think, growing up, just naturally, when you're a kid, you don't have a ton of agency. You
Yeah.
have responsibilities, and as you grow, you learn that you have choices that you can make.
Mm.
But it took me a long time to get a sense of my own agency in shaping my life and work and my path. Um, and so I think going through like school, grad school, law school, all that stuff, it was always just about achievement because that was the North Star.
Hmm.
Like what is the best thing I could get out of this opportunity. And if it was law school, it was do the law journal, get a clerkship, like all these things, get a really fancy job out of the gate. And figuring out what those goals were, it was very much guided by just ambition defined by someone else.
Hmm.
But I think once you have other responsibilities, you become a mother and you have both the responsibility of caring for your child and providing an environment that is nurturing and that is conducive to like good growth. And it just also changes the North Star of what is ambitious and
Mm.
what do you actually want. And my kind of decision making framework has been how can I make myself as fulfilled and
Hmm.
as have the most agency over my time and how I manage my energy throughout the day, such that I can be a good presence for my children and my
Mhm.
family. And I think so many people talk about self-care for mothers, but it's for me having the agency and being taken care of for myself by myself. That is like
Mhm.
step one of self-care. And that's what really allows for enjoying motherhood and being the mother I want to be. And so I've very much, since becoming a mom, focused on having that agency over my work. And I think at the time it was framed as flexibility, but
Mm.
it's more than flexibility, right? It's like I want to feel like I own my time and I own my energy, and I can, I can contribute my energy and time in the ways that I want, on a day to
Yeah.
day basis and on a year to year basis.
Yes.
So I'd say that's been the through line.
Yeah. I also found over time that I think for me, when I finally got up the courage to move on from straight
Mm.
up corporate America, it was getting out of newborn phase, like was no longer going to be having more babies.
Mm-hmm.
Our youngest was almost 3. Like I'm sort of sleeping more consistently. And suddenly
Mm-hmm.
I had this like awakening of, well, what do I want to do? And how
Yeah.
do I want to spend my time in a more, and Sai, you wrote something beautiful about this in one of your Substacks, but this idea that for men, there's like this linear life is a more linear experience than for women,
Mm-hmm.
where we are from, I think often like from the day we get our periods, like our life is no longer in our control.
Yeah.
Like we are accommodating something else.
Yeah.
And I do feel like the closest that I felt after having kids to kind of regaining some, to your point, agency of
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to be working, which I want to do for very similar reasons of it makes me feel more fulfilled. I'm a better mom, I think.
Mhm.
Um, how do I really want to be spending that time, and what is fulfilling for me? And in a way that it's not selfishness, but it sort of feels a little bit like I'm going to make my own choices and drive my own ship for a minute
Mm-hmm.
because I've been accommodating everyone else for so long.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think that's probably a common experience among
Yeah.
mothers.
And I think one other point I'll make is that I remember when we were in law school, I can't even remember, we had this panelist, and she wasn't from law. She was from, I can't even remember. Like, I should look this up. But she made this argument that, which, like, honestly did not land well in a room full of, like, hyper ambitious, like,
Yeah.
legal students. But her point was biologically, we're not, we're not designed to have kids like to start having kids really late, you know? And
Mm.
so on average, like if you're in your 20s, like this is when you should start thinking about it. And I know
Mhm.
that's like very strange for like a panelist at a law school event, but it very much tapped into something that I fundamentally understood, and I was very much papering over in my 20s, feeling like
Mhm.
when I was in my ambitious stage and I was just focused on it, I realized this is based on a man's timeline. Like none
Mhm.
of this
Yes.
was built on a woman's timeline. And why should I squeeze myself and my
Mhm.
biology into something that wasn't designed to give me agency over how I build? And so it fundamentally changed kind of this linear ordering that I had had in my head from a young age, where like you go to school, you get all the, extra schooling you need, and then you get all the best jobs. And then at some
Mm.
point, like, you'll find a family
Yeah, right.
It'll
Right.
just show
somewhere in
up
there.
at the stork will drop it off.
People will be so attracted to
You're
you, they'll
good.
just drop into your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally I see a lot of it's been interesting having moving out of this corporate space and being out of it and thinking looking back at it being like this wasn't built for me. This wasn't
Hmm.
built by me or for me, and then falling into unexpectedly little communities of women who have similar backgrounds, like high
Yep.
achieving, highly accomplished, who just suddenly wake up and are like, what the fuck?
What just
Like
happened?
why
Yeah.
am I trying to squeeze myself into this other experience? And they're now like thinking about building their own, whether their own
Yeah.
business or and redefining what success looks like, which is
Hmm.
really challenging.
Hmm.
America wants you to achieve, make more money, have a better title. And it's
Hmm.
kind of like maybe it really is a conscious exercise daily to
Hmm.
say, what is value to me? How
Mm-hmm.
do I define my worth?
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Because I personally feel a little uncomfortable being like, and I think that's where my discomfort with being a mother, quote unquote, comes from,
Mm-hmm.
which is this: I have so much education behind me and so much accomplishment behind me and so much
Oh, I know.
ambition.
Yeah.
Am I in some ways like not trying hard enough? Trying hard
Am I
enough?
just a
Yeah.
mom?
I know, the classic just
Yeah.
a mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think,
Oh, I've been there.
I don't know.
Ugh.
I
Do
mean,
you?
I've been
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Like just as like a follow up to that, the when I kind of jumped off the track when I first got pregnant, and we were still in our early 30s, and the most common question is like, what do you do?
Right.
Hmm.
Yes.
And I really had no answer to that. And even with my business, like I really had no answer to it.
Yeah.
And so it's a constant act of, you know,
Rebellion.
creation and rebellion. Yeah. Creation and resistance almost,
Yeah.
to either not answer it
Yeah.
or just not give it weight. I guess
Right.
that's what I do now. I kind of
Yeah.
skirt the question because I resist the question
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
and the
That's
premise.
great. Yeah. Is there anything that you feel like you actually do better now? I'm thinking of this in a work setting. It doesn't have to be.
Mm.
But I like being curious about whether being a parent, being a mother could actually be a strength in the workplace. For example, it helps me ruthlessly prioritize what I need to do.
Hmm.
I'm way more
Mhm.
efficient. So I'm just curious if there's ways that you've felt that you're more effective building businesses, understanding your consumer base, knowing what matters, prioritizing your time, et cetera, as a mother.
So, yeah, I that's another question I resist.
Not gonna
It's
answer.
again,
Think
it's
yeah.
again
Yeah.
asking us to show the receipts of how this experience is good for
Mm,
you. Like, it's like,
Mm.
how can I prove that what I'm doing as the fundamental, like, essential work of caring
hmm
and raising the next generation of like citizens, how can that benefit our corporate needs or
Sure.
our work needs? And I feel like trying to answer that question in some ways devalues, like it misses the point for me, I guess.
hmm
But there's no question, obviously. It's just so obvious that like being a whole human and doing the essential work of caring is valuable and skill building and character building. And those are all things that might not be itemizable on like a LinkedIn. Like
Yeah.
who's gonna, vouch for my skills. But I guess my hope is that by just being and myself never questioning the value and the skill sets that I've
Mm.
gained, being able to just stand on my own 2 feet and never question it. I mean,
Yeah.
that is to me is the only and probably the best way to answer that question. You
Yeah.
see what I mean?
I love that.
Good answer,
Screw
Sai.
the question. You're right. No, you're
No, but
right.
it's so true. It's just hard to accept that
It's like,
sometimes. Yeah.
yes, it is
Like,
absolutely hard to
yeah.
accept that, but it's almost like I can't quantify this. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is not a list of, a
It
checklist
just
of skill
is.
sets.
It just does
Yeah.
make me a better, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Um,
Do
yeah.
you feel seen as a mother?
I'd say for the first 10 years of motherhood, no.
Mm.
hmm
And then for like the last year of motherhood, I've just realized like I don't care. I don't care anymore
Yeah.
because so I'd say so much of this earlier struggle was, yes, not being seen for both mother and
Mm.
like the value I brought as a human being. I had a lot of struggles like early on, just feeling like no one was capturing just how beautiful of an experience I'm having as a mother. It was
Yeah.
just all in my head and it was all in,
Mm.
the shared experience with my kids and my family. But it almost felt like, does anybody see this? Like, does
Yeah.
anybody appreciate this?
Mhm.
And there were moments of like sadness when I felt like going through my camera roll, like there were no pictures of me in the frame.
Mm.
Um, and I think more recently, I've realized that as long as it's seen by me and experienced by me and my kids, like that's
Mm.
more
Yeah.
than enough. And I think that is the validation that we might be constantly searching for as like early on in motherhood, because it's a huge transition. But I think when I look to others who are older with older kids and, in a later stage of motherhood, I see that wisdom and that acknowledgement that
Yeah.
like, I don't need this validated by somebody else. And so I'm kind of on that train now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's incredibly profound. Like, it sounds sort of
Yeah.
maybe simple, but I just, as someone who's sort of trailed along a similar path, true for anybody, but
Yeah.
particularly coming out of, you know, crazy schools, law school, like
Mhm.
on a track that
Mhm.
really just doesn't acknowledge or allow for that, or doesn't even think that that
Mhm.
experience could be real or true. I think
Mhm.
it's so magical that you throughout that, and maybe it's the role model of your mother, even if she wasn't joyful while mothering in the same way, but that you had a spark and a heart for being open to this. And I love what you said about let's not conflate motherhood and the workplace.
Mhm.
But I also think that the beauty and the sort of soul of your products aligns with that sense of self and sense of self-worth and kind of a craving for there's got to be something more than this.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because what I'm being served feels a little cold. And
Yeah.
it feels like power and status, all of which I find that once I had kids, I that whole value proposition kind of started to crumble. Of like,
Mhm.
what am I losing by going after this versus what am I
Mm.
getting?
Mm.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
just want to give you credit because that's a hard thing to hear inside of yourself. It's a hard thing to be saying to
Yeah.
yourself and harder to say out loud and then live with.
Authentically. Yeah.
I just think that's incredible. That's why I
Mm.
think you're amazing.
I'm like, you're the wisest
This
mom.
is
So
this is the best therapy session. Woo.
It's so
Sorry.
true. Like,
Yeah.
in theory, everything you said sounds so incredible, but at least for me in this
Yeah.
like new and early stage of motherhood, I'm like, I believe all those things. And I kind of
Yeah.
want people to be like, you are just like, that outward acknowledgement sometimes does feel
Oh
good.
my
But
gosh.
ultimately, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yes. And honestly, I would say to anybody, like anybody at any stage, any gender, any role, the work of non-judgmentally complimenting and
Mm.
uplifting mothers at all
Mhm.
Mm.
stages is probably the most like you're going to get the highest ROI
Hmm.
Yeah.
as a civilization by doing that.
Yes.
Because I can point to, and I'm sure like every mom can, I can point to very specific instances
Mhm.
where people made such a small comment that just completely changed my life.
Yeah.
Mm.
The first one was, and I wish like I even like knew their names, but when we were living in Brooklyn, our daughter, my eldest, was 6 months old, and we went through some sleep training,
Mhm.
and
Went
the
through.
walls went because it was brutally necessary. And there was one night when, first time mom, I just could not bear to listen to her cry so much. But
Mm.
it probably went on not that long, but to me it was eternity. And we had a really rough night of sleep. And the next morning I was
Mm.
walking out with her for a walk, and our next door neighbor was coming out as well. And I said something along the lines of like, I'm so sorry if you heard so much crying last night. We're just going through a rough sleep patch. And she looked me very casually but seriously, and she just said, "Don't ever apologize for raising the next generation of citizens." She just like went on with her day. She
Excuse
just said,
me?
"Just don't
Aw.
apologize."
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it wasn't like overly emotional. It was just stop.
Yeah.
You know. Um,
Oof.
and
You
they
gotta
I
didn't
write that
know.
respond
down.
to
What
it.
the
I
hell?
know. And the
Anyway,
other
so
thing
we need to
was,
find her.
I
Yeah.
know, and she,
Mm.
as far as I know, at least there were no kids in that
Mm.
household. So I don't think she had kids, at least at the time.
Oh,
And so I
interesting.
knew she was coming from a position of you're doing your thing, and
Yeah.
I support you. Just
Mm.
not even just as like a friend, but a neighbor, a fellow citizen, not even
Mm.
as like I'm a mother too. It was very much just like it wasn't cold, but it also wasn't from like a self-serving, let
Yeah.
me. And that was
Very
just one of
matter of
those
fact.
comments.
Just
Yeah,
like,
very matter of
yeah,
fact.
That sounds like something Michelle Obama would say. Was it her?
truly.
Yes.
Anyway, so that actually was the Michelle Obama.
Oh my gosh.
She had this boyfriend around, this lanky dude. I'm just kidding. We're not that old.
We're not that old. Yeah.
Kind of maybe along those lines. I'm curious. None of us really do this entirely alone. What have been sort of key enablers to you maintaining your sense of self or being your best self as a mother?
Oh my gosh, girlfriends,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my like Sarah knows, like I have incredible friends from college who have known me, now 20, almost 25 years, and we've been through it all. I had the very like unique joy and thrill of becoming pregnant for the first time with one of those friends in New York City and having girls like, just a couple of weeks apart and
Oh,
like
that's so
going through
special.
those early stages of motherhood with somebody that was close was just like such a gift. I
Yeah.
can't like in retrospect, like that was such a gift that like I didn't even appreciate fully at the time. So that has been a huge source of support, reference point, feeling seen, like no judgment, being
Yeah.
able to say all the things, complain about all the things. That has, been a huge part of my motherhood journey. And then obviously my husband. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's obvious. Like I can't be a mother without him.
Yeah.
Um, and having that partner who is fully on board and, does all the things. We definitely have different skill sets, if you will.
Approaches, styles. That was a nice way to put it.
Skill sets. But I think one of the biggest, learnings is understanding my own um, journey of, I can say intellectually what I thought motherhood should be, and I can say intellectually what feminism is or what being a feminist is and what that looks like. But there's also acknowledgement of like my experience as a child, what I experience, what moves the needle emotionally and in terms of fulfillment. Those are not intellectual. Like those are very much shaped by early experiences. And that's true for everybody, right? Like, so you kind of have to take people on the journey with
Yeah.
you and partnership is really that act of, okay, we have our collective journey together as parents and partners, but we also have our individual journeys of our families of origin and the experiences that we had growing up that shape how we approach, parenting, how we approach partnership, and the different roles that we take on.
Yeah.
I love that. I loved when you said we are something along these lines. I'm going to butcher what you said, but you're the mother you are because of the way your mother mothered. And that's something Sarah and I have talked about before of
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, so much of what I do is either guided or inspired by what my mom did or what she didn't do
Right.
oftentimes too.
Yeah.
Like I find
Pendulum.
that, yeah, like it's almost easier to be like, oh, these are the things that I did not, did not
Mhm.
receive, or I wouldn't choose to do that or whatever to
And
reflect
over
on.
time, like I've realized we all will have shortcomings, right? And our
Mhm.
kids will also have these conversations about us and our
I know.
mothering, and that is just life.
Yep. It's scary to think about too. Yeah. But
Yes.
it just is.
Um, to take it in a negative direction, a dark direction. I was just curious. Motherhood is good and bad and fulfilling and empty, all this, like so many things all at once. I am curious to hear what were kind of dark times where you're like, I don't even know how we're gonna
Mm.
get through
Who
this.
signed up for this?
Yeah. And kind of how you navigated.
Oh, the pandemic, definitely. Like I said,
Yeah.
I was pregnant with my fourth. I had a very active toddler.
Mhm.
Mm.
I had a kindergartner who was in school and at the time of shutdown, right, in 2020. And then I had a preschooler who was having some struggles in preschool. So it was a lot, and
Yeah.
transitioning, managing like the closing of a business, the just the health stuff related to pregnancy,
Yeah.
and delivering. We went through all of the options of like, because it was in the height of the pandemic that I gave birth. Yay.
Yeah. Ugh,
And all the protocols around that. It was
I
just,
know. You're like
at times
alone
it
on
was
a
really
bed.
frightening.
Yeah.
And knowing how it used to be
Yeah.
versus mourning the loss of that experience.
I
And
know,
yeah.
but honestly, I was so grateful that it wasn't my first, because that would have
Hmm.
been
Oh, yeah.
even more challenging. Like the
Sure.
unknowing. At least I knew what to expect, and I'd done it before. But that was a dark time. I'd
Yeah.
say, an extension of that was, I have a kid who has shown us over and over again that, like, no matter how many times you do this, your kids are their own person,
Mm.
and there have been challenges. And there was one time, it was kind of the second year of the pandemic, and he was about to enter kindergarten, and we knew he needed some help, and so we kind of dedicated all our time to getting like expert help, and we traveled
Mm.
to get all this extra support, and we went to all the best experts, and we threw so much money at it. We put all of our time and energy into it at a time when I had, like a baby and two other kids, and
Mm.
it was the pandemic. And then after all of that, when I thought about it, I realized these experts really don't know my child.
You know
That
Yeah.
your
was like,
child.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was like the greatest lesson from that period of hardship. At the end of it all, just realizing that at the end of the day, my job is to constantly advocate for my child, because there's no one who knows my child better than me and my husband. And
Mhm.
that is something that was such a valuable lesson that I continue to take with me. And so those were probably the most challenging times. I'm sure there are more challenging times ahead. I think, my eldest
Yeah.
is 11, so we've got some teen years ahead of us,
No, I'm not
Oof.
prepared.
Scary. No, thank you.
but
Yeah.
hopefully for the best.
Armed by a lot of great experience.
Hmm.
All right, last sort of philosophical question, then we have some kind of quick answer, rapid fire things. But and I'm curious actually, this idea of having it all and that, women can't have it all. I wonder if generationally that even the notion that that's something we should be worrying about maybe has diminished a little bit, but it
Hmm.
seems to kind of linger.
Hmm.
Curious if it's something that you think about, like this idea of having it all and maybe what it all really is.
I think it all, the way I would define it, is going back to that sense of agency over your life and
Mm.
your work. And I think you mentioned power. And I think for me, the shift I've seen in myself and in the last year or two is more of a transition from like thinking about like just focusing on all of our family time and being a mom and being there for the kids, and transitioning to searching for that power. Because after kind of that decade of being full-time caregiver and
Mm.
having the demands of motherhood take up like a large chunk of my pie chart,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting on that, I realized I think to really live out my ethos of having agency over, I need to find a way to empower myself. And it's like a work in progress in terms of defining what power means to me.
Yeah.
But it did wear me down in terms of my sense of power, which is different from a sense of agency.
Mm-hmm.
There is a certain element within this notion of power that does require acknowledgement or granting from elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so much that I'm searching for it because I feel a shortcoming. It's more that if I prioritized caregiving and I prioritize motherhood, to me, my theory of action for my impact is to be able to find a way to channel that experience and to channel that journey into something where I can share it with others.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Um, so the going back to like the question of what is all, like what does it
Yeah.
mean to have it all? There are very few models that I have in my head, but I just think the timeline and the sequencing of it all is what we need to shake up. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is just no reason why we should have it all by age 30, like, or
Mm-hmm.
even 40 for that matter, right?
Yeah.
If we're lucky and we're healthy and we have more to give and more to contribute, and more to do, there's no reason why in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond,
Mm-hmm.
we can't contribute more. I think my goal or my mission, I guess, at this stage is to find ways to engage and contribute and kind of reaffirm or reclaim the power that I can have outside my house and outside my family. It's kind of like a coming out party, right? It's like, okay, my kids
Yeah.
are old enough that they're, going to school and
Yeah.
doing the things. And it's not to say that my responsibilities and, my calendar is a lot open or anything like that, but
Yeah.
it's, having more of that separation, like having kids that are slightly older, like I do think that having it all is the ability to sequence and time and shape kind of the narrative of what comes first, what you prioritize first, how you want to do that, and what contributions you can make later in life.
Yeah. It's so good because one of the idea of doing these conversations was marinating for a while, but then there was some urgency added to it when I started seeing articles and hearing from my younger in-laws and various sibling-ish people about just really questioning overall whether they even want to have kids, and not because
Yeah.
the world's
Yeah.
ending and because of the environment, etc., but because they're like that. It just seems like what happens specifically to the woman in that setting is that they
Mm,
entirely lose themselves. It's miserable. They never sleep. They'll never achieve their dreams, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And not that I'm here to say like everyone should have kids, but I think in that is such where we are today, such short term. It's such a short term perspective,
mhm,
and I am very curious and hopeful that over the long arc of motherhood,
mhm.
parenthood, that there's such richness on the other
Mm-hmm.
end. It might suck in the short term unless you have your first child who seems like an angel. My first child was terrible, but it can be terrible.
Can't relate, but that's cool for
I
you.
know. Vino's. No, just kidding. I love you. But I do think that we need to take a step back and think about this in a much broader purview
Yeah.
because it's not all at once. It's not having it all right now.
Yeah.
It's a full life that we're building.
Yeah.
So
And
I love that.
I like, if you just think rationally, right? Like if we are living as women on average to what? Like what's the average lifespan? How is it rational that you are expecting yourself to
Yeah.
contribute all of it and achieve all of it by age 30 or 35?
Yeah.
Like that's less than 50% of the average, right?
Right.
Lifespan. So believing in that and refusing or opting out of motherhood because of this perception is just feeding into the patriarchy and
Yeah.
what, it's
Yeah.
just, I agree. Like I am so supportive of anybody who decides not to have children. I'm
Yeah.
like, yay, good for you.
Yeah.
But don't be coerced into that,
Right.
and
Yes.
that's just letting someone else win.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I agree. I'm so glad you're having these conversations because the more narratives of women shaping their own life, family, career trajectory in their own way, we just need more markers. We need more stories.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the one of the few that are like kind of prominent out there is like Nancy Pelosi. Like she had
Yep.
a whole life before entering
Yes.
politics, but she's like one story and not
Yes.
everyone wants to go into politics, right? But the point is that the more like the act of resistance or the act of creation or however you want to frame it, you start with yourself and then you share it. And I think if every woman did that for themselves, then we would have so much more ability en masse to
Yes.
influence next generation of
Yeah.
women and girls.
Yes. I love it. Well, you're very much doing that yourself. So really
I'm
appreciate
trying.
you being here and sharing the stories. We have, if you tolerate it, sort of
Yeah.
short answer. Rapid fire feels aggressive,
Rapid
but
fire.
little closing questions, and
Mhm.
then we'll send everyone on their way. But so, if you could tell your new mom self one
Mhm.
thing, what would it be?
Enjoy the stage you're in. I've gone through many stages of this, but for a time, I thought I want to get all the wisdom of everybody who's gone through it. Then I went through a period of like, oh, but they don't get it. Like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
these like Gen X moms, like they don't understand what I'm going through. Like I have to say, like I went through years of
Yeah.
that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even a full decade of that. And then now that I'm here, I'm
Yeah.
like, now I have some perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say, don't worry about the thing that you were worrying about as a first time mom. It's more just acknowledge where you are,
Yeah.
but go through it. I think there's a careful balance between taking and learning from the wisdom of women who came before you and moms who are a bit ahead of you, and also not cutting yourself short of the experience of going through it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you kind of have to strike that balance.
Yeah.
Mm.
If you could provide yourself or your family one thing along this motherhood journey that would have made it just a little bit easier, what would that be?
Like what I said about my band of female friends,
Mm-hmm.
that is everything when it comes to
Mhm.
getting,
Yeah.
getting the support you need as a new mom. And mind you, at the time I became a new mom, I not many of them were moms yet, but just having female friends, like,
Yeah.
it's just such a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to be better about that. Maybe this whole podcast is
What?
just my
You're
way to
great.
try to get more friends.
Anyway, so Ty, can I count you as a friend? Yes or no?
Exactly.
Yes.
Perfect.
It's a
I'm on
recruitment
board.
exercise in public. Okay, last question. Your kids may be listening, or one day they
Mhm.
will. Is there
Mhm.
anything you'd like to say to them?
Without me crying.
I
Oh.
know. Or cry. I've cried on this podcast before.
That they're so loved, and
Yeah.
they're so wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're so lucky.
Yeah.
They
Ty, you're
really
such a
are.
great human.
Yes,
Yeah.
for real. You also happen to be an Aquarius, am I right?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a theme that I
Totally.
didn't mean to make a thing. I'm also
Are
an
you all?
Aquarius.
Wait, when's your
I'm
birthday?
not.
These
I'm a
not, but you
Virgo.
could probably tell. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But in the
Offensively,
last
no, I'm
couple
not
weeks,
sure.
I've been noticing the people around me who are having birthdays. I'm like, well, no wonder you're awesome. You're an Aquarius.
Well, actually, I haven't double checked. Am I still an Aquarius since they updated?
I don't know.
They
It
changed
seems like it
it?
to me. Who can
Can you
change it?
change that?
That's such
I
an
think
Aries
they
thing to
changed
do. Was
it.
it?
How do you change that? Has it not
I
always
don't know.
been what it is?
You're an
I think we
Aquarius as far as
discovered
I know.
another something something. I don't know. I think
Oh,
I'm
you
still
are.
an
I just
Aquarius.
looked it up. It's January
Okay.
20th to February 18th.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think
Yeah.
but some people have had to change their
Oh,
identities.
that's tough.
That's a whole different person. I am a Virgo. Like, I could not change. That'd be bad.
Well, thank you so much. This
Thanks
was
for talking with
like
us.
beautiful. I really, really appreciate everything that you have to say. And I think your perspective, first, it's great for yourself. It's great for your kids and your family, but it's really, really generous that you can share it with us and our listeners. And I think
Yeah.
it'll set everyone's minds at ease and feel a little less scared.
And I'm so looking forward to you having amazing, much more famous and prominent moms on your podcast. And I
No.
will always have the title of first guest.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You can send it to Sarah McLaughlin.
Oh my God, totally. Yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, make your wish list. Make your wish list.
We
Of,
have.
We have our dream list.
Yeah.
I just feel like people need to take our kids out of the closet. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many badass women out there doing all these things. And then you're like,
Yeah.
wait, and you have kids? Like, why aren't we talking about that? So yeah, if people come across your radar and you were like, I'd love to ask them some questions, let me know.
We'll
I
ask
know.
them for you.
Yeah.
I know. I had my own kind of like dream list of women that I just wanted to learn from. So
Yeah.
I'll share. But thank you for
Wow.
having me. This is
My
been so
gosh,
fun.
the
Thanks
best.
for
And no children
chatting.
came running across the screen. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I've had so many of those like work calls, and I have a standing
happens.
desk. So of course, like they can't see that there are children scurrying at my feet.
Cute.
Wow.
So, wow, what a combo.
yeah.
Sai's the best because
so
she's an
cool.
Aquarius, but probably for other reasons too.
And not a changed Aquarius. She's an OG original. I
She
didn't even know that was
withstood
a
the test
thing.
of time. Yeah, she was amazing. As you were saying, I love that she pushed back on some of our questions. She
Yeah.
like rejected the premise, which is so cool. Like,
so badass.
why should we
great.
make being a mother better for the workplace?
Other people.
And what'd she say?
Oh.
Why do you need my receipts? Like whatever that is.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. And just, ugh, her kids are so lucky. Like
I know.
and it really, really is remarkably impressive to be able to coming out of what she came, like the schooling that she had, the world that she existed in as a lawyer, law school, and then also the immigrant background, I think is also, we didn't even get to talk about enough. But I just think there are a lot of pressures to, I don't know, achieve, be successful, like keep climbing the ladder. You know what I mean? And I feel like she was able to pause and think what really fills up my cup. And I love the agency concept. Ugh, so much goodness. We're all wiser because of her. Thank you, Sai.
She's incredible. Thanks for talking to us.
I know. What a way to start.
Yeah.
Okay. In our we have to do our sign off, our joyfulness question. Where are we finding
Sarah Brown? Where is your joyfulness?
I was like, you go first.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I know. I need to reflect too.
Okay. My joyfulness is in actually acknowledging the little wins versus deeply feeling all of the little big failures. I feel like we're doing amazing stuff building this thing. And all I feel and think about are the little ways that it's not done yet, essentially.
Classic Sarah Brown being
I know. Where did this come from? It's like a new thing.
That's weird because that's not how you normally are.
Okay, V, where is your joyfulness?
I'm going to snowball off of that.
Do it. It's the season of snow.
Yeah, true. Being able to have these having this conversation with Sai and getting feedback and the joy that it's giving you is giving me joy.
Yeah.
Like it gets me giddy to hear. Like
good.
Seeing you be validated and then therefore seeing me be validated. Like, yes, these are valid conversations. This is exciting. People want and not just want, but like need to hear it.
Yes.
Makes me excited. So that's what my joyfulness is this week.
Yes.
And other people's, but also therefore mine.
Yeah. Well, we're all bringing people joy. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you to your partner, wherever that person is holding your small child.
Honestly, unclear at the moment, but I know that we came home with Duncan, so I'm happy about that.
Oh my God, Duncan, sponsor me. Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode and we can reach even more rock stars like you. The Mothers is a production of Backline Media, shining a light on those who carry the team.